In this episode, we're going to discuss the Corporate Transparency Act of 2020, also known as the CTA. Now, this act becomes effective January 1st, 2024, and the penalties for non-compliance are fairly stiff. They can be a $500 a day fine, the maximum of $10,000, or 2-year prison sentence. So if you're a business owner thinking of forming a business or buying a business, this episode is for you. As always, if you've got questions as I go through this presentation, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can, and or just simply drop me an email and I'll respond, and or we'll put together a time to chat on the phone. In addition, if you find this episode helpful, please hit the like and subscribe button to help the channel grow. The Corporate Transparency Act of 2020 was passed by Congress, obviously in 2020, with an effective date of January 1, 2024, but with the sole purpose of the legislation was to combat money laundering and tax fraud. Now, who must report? Domestic reporting companies, meaning corporations, limited liability companies, and or partnerships, must file this report. There are some exemptions, and this is where I'd say talk to your legal counsel if you think you are exempt from filing this, because like I said in the open, the penalties for making a mistake are fairly large. So what information are you going to need to actually fill this report out and file it with the federal government? Well, let's start with who they're deciding or defining as owners, and they're using the term beneficial owners, which is any owner of the company that owns more than 25%. They're also looking for anybody who has substantial control over the corporation, and that is obviously the owners, but executive officers and or board of directors. So you're going to need to really take a look at this, and this is the piece where I probably, if you've got questions, I talk to your corporate counsel, because again, the penalties for this are fairly stiff. But they're going to be looking for a full legal name, date of birth, owner's residential address, the business address, an ID number from a government issued ID, and a scanned copy of an issued ID with your or your owner's photo. So the information here isn't extensive, but you've got to make sure that you get everybody involved that information. When do you have to actually report? Well, if you own the company, or if it was formed prior to January 1 of 2024, you have all of 2024 to actually file that report. If the company was formed after January 1st of 2024, you have until January 1st of 2025, with the exception of you must submit within 90 days of formation. And here's the big one, and this is a change of beneficial ownership, or any of the details surrounding ownership. So let's say you have 3 business owners and one of them buys a new house and moves. You technically are going to have to refile that form within a 30-day period. So this becomes really important. Any change in any of the details surrounding anybody that's on the beneficial owner or control of the corporation, you've got to make sure that anytime there is a change of address or any change to any of that information with regards to any of those individuals, that you amend your report within 30 days. Remember, there's a $500 a day penalty, up to $10,000, or 2 years in prison. So how do you file a report? Well, supposedly it's fairly simple. the federal government set up a Federal Crimes Enforcement Network website, or FinCEN for short, and you can log on there, create a password, and put your report through that website, and there's no fee for doing it. I've been working on a series of episodes surrounding just the basics of business ownership, from business formation, governance, insurance, business banking, and a few other things to put out this coming year. And I was lucky enough to be filming the first episode around business formations and governance with Erich Merrill Jr. of Miller Nash. Now, Miller Nash is a pretty well-known attorney firm up and down the West Coast, and we started to actually talk about these requirements as it relates to your operating agreement or your buy-sell agreement. So I thought I'd take a little bit of a cut of that conversation with Erich and share here.
Let me mention another reason that people should update their buy-sell agreements, and this is as of right now. We're having this interview in December of 2023, so if you're viewing it later, this will be even more pertinent. There's a new act called the Corporate Transparency Act.
Right.
Actually, the act is not new. It's been around a couple of years, but it goes into effect January 1, 2024, and it requires that corporations and entities of all sizes, regardless of whether you're privately held or public or whatever, file really very detailed ownership reports with the federal government. In order to file those reports, you have to be able to get the information needed for them from your owners and from those who control the entity. So one thing we are currently recommending that clients do is update their buy-sell agreements or shareholder agreements or operating and LLC agreements to put a clause in that requires each owner to provide the company with the information required by the federal act. And on top of that, and perhaps more important, if there is ever a change in this information, so if a shareholder moves, if they renew their driver's license, it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They need to notify the entity right away, because the entity has a very short time, typically 30 days, to file an updated report with the federal government. This sounds probably like, oh, this is just record keeping and not important. It's the reason for this law is to try to combat money laundering and to some extent terrorism. And the Congress deemed it important enough that they made this a criminal statute. So you can go to jail for 2 years if you just ignore it and don't try to keep the information updated for those in your corporation. So that's why this is so important as something that you may want to put in a buy-sell agreement.
Well, nobody ever said owning a business was for the faint of heart and/or was going to be easy. Now, this information that you need to gather to file these reports is going to be pretty straightforward and shouldn't be that difficult. It is the process around maintaining them and making sure that any of your owners, corporate officers, and or board of directors let you know if they've got a change to their personal information that needs to be refiled and updated on a continual basis. The penalties for non-compliance in this act are fairly stiff. And so if you've got questions as to whether your corporation qualifies for an exemption from reporting and or who should actually be you should include in that report, I strongly suggest you talk to your corporate attorneys to make those decisions. So with that, I hope you found this episode helpful, and we'll see you in the next episode.